Karma here with your July Astrology cheat codes. If you are here, you recognize that we are astrologically influenced by the planets and stars. And with that understanding of how the energy influences us, we can better navigate life's obstacles. So welcome to the club, and let's take an overall look at what happens in July. All right, so in July, we have several planets going into retrograde. We have Neptune, Saturn going into retrograde in the realm of Aries and will retrograde back to Pisces. We have Mercury going into retrograde in the realm of Leo. We have Venus transitioning into both Cancer and Gemini. We have a Capricorn full moon, and we have a Leo new moon. And additionally, Uranus crosses into Gemini. So there's a lot happening in this month, especially with this retrograde energy, because many of these things are aspecting back to Neptune and Saturn. So there's an emphasis here on lessons, okay? And when Saturn hits retrograde, it can become like a pretty ugly energy. Saturn retrograde energy can sometimes be a little funky, okay? Because Saturn is the planet of karma. Saturn is also the planet of lessons, right? So as it goes into retrograde, it makes you retrospective of the lessons that you need to learn. And sometimes that can be kind of hard. That's a hard energy, okay? That's a hard energy to navigate. So, Saturn is going to be in retrograde for a minute. All right. So this is just the beginning, but it will cross back into Pisces, so it won't be as active in that Aries energy, but nonetheless, still lessons on lessons, okay? Lessons on lessons. All right, so I'm not going to go into deep analysis of each individual transit. I will give you the energy of the transit as it is transitioning into whatever is happening. However, I will create separate videos for all of the things that are happening in July so that we can get a more deep dive look at what it is everyone is supposed to be working on. But this will just be a summary of what's going on in July. So let's talk about the signs. If you are looking at this from the perspective of your rising sign, okay, this will be most accurate for your rising sign. This is because it encompasses your horizon of your life, okay? Your rising sign, your ascendant sign, the horizon of your life. This encompasses everything, okay? If you're looking at this from your sun perspective, your sun sign, this will be in relation to your ego, your attention, your focus, okay? If you are looking at this from your moon sign, this will be in relation to your emotions, your instincts, and your intuition. Okay, so with that, let's jump into the individual signs. Leo, so there's an overall emphasis here on your 9th, your 1st, and your 11th house. Okay, so there is retrograde energy in your 9th house of Aries, and that is going to be between Neptune and Saturn. Both of them are going to go into retrograde in the month of July. Mercury is going to go into retrograde in your 1st house of Leo. And then you have Uranus transitioning into your 11th house of Gemini. So this really speaks to your discovery and expansion, right? Because that's your 9th house. That is your worldview. That's your ideology, okay? Your 1st house of self. This is your ego, your focus, the mask you present to yourself. And then also your perception or your perspective as it relates to your community and how you express yourself there, okay? So there's heavy emphasis there. And within this 1st house, there are several things that are happening as it relates to the new moon in Leo. We have the sun crossing into Leo, and then we also have Mercury in Leo, so in retrograde. So there's heavy emphasis on like your identity, yourself, and the mask you present, okay? So let's jump into the dates. On July 4th, Venus enters into Gemini in your 11th house. Okay, so this is how you express yourself within your community. This is your friendships. This is your acquaintances. This is your social clubs, your hopes, wishes, and dreams. Okay, now Venus crossing into the 11th house. This speaks to your relationships, right? This speaks to your creative opportunities within your community. This speaks to the peace that you may feel there or the peace that you bring there, right? And this is sextile at the moment to Saturn and Neptune in the 9th house. Now, on the same day, in the 9th house, right, Neptune goes into retrograde, and Neptune represents your subconscious. So this is your imagination, this is your dreams, this is your idealism in in the house of discovery and ideology, right? So there's an emphasis here on actions that you take around exploration. Okay, so with Venus crossing into the 11th house of Gemini and Neptune going into retrograde on the same day, there's an emphasis here on something from the past, or you discovering within your friends group or community something that adjusts your mind or your curiosity, something that may pull you in, or you could find, you know, like energy around like the shallowness that you hold within your community, or an imbalance within your friends group as well, right? This is sextile energy. It's not good or bad. It points us in the right direction. So if you see energy that bubbles up that may not feel favorable to you, right? This is energy that you need to work on within yourself, right? So that it does feel favorable. It is an opportunity for you to shift and pivot and change your perspective. So that is what's going to pop up between the 11th and the 9th house. There's an emphasis here on, you know, your world view, your ideology, discovery, exploration, and how that ties into your community, or vice versa, how your community ties into discovery and exploration and your ideology for yourself. Okay. So again, July 4th, Neptune goes into retrograde. So retrograde is the triple R: reflection, restructure, repair. So this is an opportunity for, you know, you to see something, right? This points to something specific. And with that retrograde, this is something that's internal to you, right? This could be something from the past, but ultimately it's something to point out where we can work on ourselves. Okay. On July 7th, Uranus enters into Gemini in that 11th house as well. So we have now Venus in that 11th house, and now we have Uranus in that 11th house. And again, the 11th house is still sextile to that 9th house of discovery and exploration. Okay, so Uranus is the planet of sudden change. It crossing into Gemini. It has been sextile to Neptune and Saturn in that 9th house. Neptune is now in retrograde. Saturn is about to join it in a second. I'm about to tell you. Saturn is about to join it. So there's emphasis here on restructure of your community and restructure of like your worldview, your ideology around that, how it is you explore, how it is you discover within that realm of life. Okay. So with Uranus being the planet of sudden changes, right, there's something here that might change for you. But this is again exploration of originality of thought, right? This is heavy emphasis. Uranus is crossing into Gemini, the realm of Gemini, which is air. Uranus rules over Aquarius, which is air. So this is heavy emphasis on your mindset, your thought process, and how it is you think about this energy. Okay. Then on July 10th, there's a full moon in Capricorn, and that happens in your 6th house, okay? Capricorn represents, you know, diligence, like many of the other earth signs, you know, reliability. So this is an emphasis on how it is you are showing up within your daily routines, okay? There would have been a new moon back in January of 2025, right? So this would have been a 6-month cycle of something. At the beginning of the year, there's something here that slightly popped up for you, and the theme of that has been progressing over the 6 months, and now we reach the Capricorn full moon, which is in your 6th house, and this represents your routines, right? So there's an emphasis on your routines, the diligence you have within those routines, the discipline or the focus that you hold within those routines that plays a part into your community. So there's something here with this full moon in Capricorn that pops up in your 6th house to show you something new. On July 13th, Saturn goes into retrograde in that 9th house, right? So again, discovery, ideology, and that 9th house is sextile to your 7th house, all right? So we have 11, 9, and 7, right? For some people, this could be a relationship. For some people, this could be, partnerships. For some people, this could be travel. For some people, this is the exploration of your hopes, wishes, and dreams. But there is an emphasis here with this 9th house in retrograde, because now both Saturn and Neptune are in retrograde in that 9th house. There is an emphasis here around exploration or discovery and the courage you have within that realm, like the assertive behavior you have within that. And then your 7th house of Aquarius, that is where Pluto is for you. So there is some sort of change around your long-term bonds. That Pluto energy is the most outlying planet, and overall, all of the inner planets are helping to create the overall theme of Pluto, right? So there's an emphasis here in the 7th house of long-term bonds, commitments, business partnerships, legal battles, right? There's something overall here that is progressing as it relates to Pluto. This 9th house, the things that pop up in this 9th house in retrograde, and the things that pop up in this 11th house, right, are things to help you understand your long-term bonds. So again, this is the courage around discovery within your community, your self-expression within your community. Okay, on July 18th, Mercury goes into retrograde, and that is going to be in your 1st house of Leo. So there's an emphasis here of, Mercury being in retrograde, bringing back the past, right? So there's emphasis here on like the mask you present to the world, the mask, the attitude that you have, the purpose that you have here, your ego or your pride, right? So with this retrograde energy, you're going to see opportunities that relate to the mass that you present within your community, because Mercury will be sextile to that 11th house where Venus is sitting. Okay, Mercury will be sextile Venus. So again, this is the creativity, the harmony that you have in your 11th house, and the flexibility of your mind as it relates to that, your imaginative, curious nature as it relates to like the relationships that you have, the love that you have, the wishes, the hopes, the dreams, the abundance you want to attain, right? There's an emphasis here with this Mercury in retrograde in your 1st house. There are going to be opportunities for you to kind of change your perspective, or maybe change your focus, create new opportunities that kind of help you go further. But while Mercury is in retrograde, the things that pop up are things that kind of shine a light on retrograde energy, is reflection, restructure, repair, right? This is an internal thing. Retrograde energy is an internal thing, which is why they say don't start anybody's type of relationship in retrograde, especially Venus retrograde, because the energy is just different, right? When it's in retrograde. So again, this retrograde being in your 1st house, the energy is going to be focused on you, your very internal self, your ego, your pride, and how you show up, the mask you present, and how that helps or destruct you, right? So there's an emphasis here on lessons around that. Then on July 22nd, in that same house, the sun enters Leo. It becomes your season, Leo. Woo! Happy birthday, Leos! Happy birthday, Leos! Happy birthday, Leos! I'm a Leo moon, so love me a Leo. But there is an emphasis here. Again, the self. The sun enters the 1st house. The sun, which rules Leo, enters the 1st house of Leo for you, Leo. Leo, 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 right? So there's emphasis on like attention. There's emphasis on drama. There's emphasis on ego and pride, right? But there's also emphasis on creativity and charisma, right? So there, again, and that sextile still happens to that 11th 11th house within your community. And then to top it all off, you then will have a new moon in Leo on the 24th in that same first house of self, Leo, right? So again, there's emphasis on community. There's emphasis on discovery and exploration, worldview and ideology. And then there's emphasis on yourself, right? How my ego applies to that, how my mask that I present to the world applies to that, how my focus, where my focus is, and how that can change. These are the themes of July for you, Leo. Okay, so with that new moon in the first house, the first degrees, okay, you have the sun that's sitting there. You have Mercury in retrograde in that house. And now you have this Leo new moon there. So again, if we talk about moon cycles, it's always a 6-month moon cycle. This is the beginning of some sort of cycle. Okay, there is development that will happen over the next 6 months. And there is sextile energy to Uranus in that 11th house, which is like sudden change. All right, sudden change within your community because Uranus crossed into the 11th house earlier in the month. And then there's also trine energy to that 9th house where Neptune and Saturn, that retrograde house where Neptune and Saturn are sitting, where you have lessons that are happening, right? So again, this speaks to like sudden changes. This is retrograde energy. So this is energy that pops up with this new moon, energy that pops up that has you reflecting on your ideology or your worldview. This could be a second life partner, you know, going back to school for higher education. This could be law, ethics. This is travel, long distance travel, right? So there's an emphasis here on could be traveling with friends, right? And how it is you show up within that energy. This could be, you know, a friend becoming a second life partner and it's starting to develop over the next 6 months. This could be you going back to school because you want to start something new and like there is a change in your focus, right? So now you are going back to school so that, you know, you can be a little bit more humanitarian. Maybe you go back to school to be like a nurse, or you go back to school to be a psychologist or something. Like it could be anything, right? However, this speaks to your actions, a change of focus, or the mask that you present, the ego, the pride that you show, your community, right? And how you show up there, your self-expression there. And then also discovery and exploration, change in ideology or worldview, spirituality, religion, right? It could be anything, right? But these are the 3 themes in July. And then last, we have Venus entering into Cancer. Venus will enter Cancer on July 31st. Now, Venus was just in Gemini in your 11th house, right? Made her way all the way through that 11th house. And now Venus will be in that 12th house of Cancer. Now, Cancer and Aries energy don't mix well. Venus crossing into the 1st degrees of that 12th house, right? This speaks to your ego and your subconscious, your creative opportunities, the harmony you feel within that, right? But it's square. Okay, it is square to Saturn and Neptune in retrograde in that 9th house, right? So the fire and water energy don't necessarily mesh, okay? However, again, these are just lessons, right? Periods in which energy pop up and we have the opportunity to adjust and recalibrate so that it feels a little bit better, right? With this Cancer and Aries energy, right? They are opposing. They're like the energy just doesn't mesh. It's oil and water, is fire and it's water. So there's an emphasis here around your subconscious being triggered possibly, and you having a better understanding of how your super internal self, the hidden parts of yourself, maybe restrict you in this 9th house, or vice versa, how something that you are doing, exploration, you know, spirituality, religion, higher education, how that plays a part into your subconscious and allowing your fears to kind of like bubble up and self-sabotage you or self-destruct you, right? So that's energy of Venus in Cancer. Okay, but I will make a video on all of these things individually so we can go deeper into the energy and really fully understand what each of these means. But I just wanted to give you a general synopsis. Okay, so overall for you, Leo, your emphasis here within the month of July is yourself, right? There are opportunities happening within your first house, of yourself. There are opportunities happening within your 11th house, your self-expression within your community, and there are opportunities happening in your 9th house, which is your ideology and your worldview. Now, again, we have the 9th house is in complete retrograde in July. Okay, Neptune and Saturn will be in retrograde. So this speaks to lessons, right? This is easy flow of energy and opportunities. But again, it speaks to lessons that can allow us to, again, retrograde, restructure. Again, retrograde, reflection, restructure, repair, things that we can, little tidbits of lessons that we can use to kind of navigate ourselves to our highest and greatest good. Okay, Leo, I hope this message reaches you well.